Welcome to the third in a series of four QuickBooks webinars. The subject of this webinar is QuickBooks Online for Expert User. My name is John Ripple, and I am a Canton SCORE volunteer. For those that are just joining for the first time, I'd like to tell you a little bit about SCORE. SCORE is a nonprofit that has been around since 1964. And is a resource partner of the SBA, which is the Small Business Administration. SCORE has more than 17 million, we've helped over 17 million entrepreneurs start, grow, and even help them exit their business. SCORE's mission is to foster vibrant small business communities through mentoring and education. There are over 240 chapters across the United States with over 10,000 volunteers. SCORE offers counseling that is free of charge and is confidential to both for-profit and nonprofit businesses, as well as host workshops and webinars like the one today. So on the screen is the contact information for Canton SCORE, but I would encourage those in the region to reach out to your local chapter for guidance to help your business survive and or grow. So housekeeping items before we get started. If you do have a question, we encourage you to ask your question in the Q&A tab that you see at the bottom of your screen. The presenter will be monitoring the Q&A tab and will respond to your questions throughout the program. This webinar is being recorded. You will receive a link to the recording in case you would like to revisit the webinar at another time. So with that, let's get started. So today's presenter, as in the previous weeks, is Ann Sharp. So Ann, the platform is yours.
Awesome. Good morning, guys. So today we're going to round out our QuickBooks Online training with talking about some of our customization features that QuickBooks has. You guys have had some questions about, classes, locations, payroll's been brought up, contractors have been brought up, journal entries, those types of things. So we're really going to spend some time on that stuff today. So let me bring up our agenda. So the first thing we're going to do is change our subscription, and we're going to change our subscription today so that you can see some of these features we're going to cover today, because in the middle of the road subscription we're in, we actually don't have the ability to do POs. We don't have the ability to do classes and locations. We don't have the ability to do project costing. So we definitely have to make sure that we get some of that stuff updated. So we're going to go over how you change your subscription. I'm going to upgrade us. We're going to use it, and then I'm going to downgrade us so you can see both sides of it on how you do it. Okay. And then I'm going to tell you how to turn some of these things on. Because obviously once you upgrade, they don't just automatically populate. So we'll go over how to turn on items and turn them off. Again, that's done in the settings. Okay. We're going to talk about project costing. Obviously, it may be for construction industries specifically. This could be for nonprofits if they're doing an event they're trying to cost against. Even they could treat a grant as a project costing. Okay. We're going to talk about editing accounts, which we do briefly cover, editing transactions, why we would use sub-accounts, what are their relevancy here, and then setting them up, contractors and payroll, voiding versus deleting, which is a big one. We're going to look at the budget feature. Again, not everybody in the small business world uses a budget. That might be more for a nonprofit person. But if you use a budget or think you want to get a budget in place, it's a great tool. We'll talk about some miscellaneous tools in general, journal entries, adding receipts, which plays into kind of the mobile area, which if you guys don't use the mobile app, it does function a little bit different than the actual web platform. We're going to talk about sales tax and the difference between what QuickBooks is doing and what you guys are filing actually with the state. We've had questions about reoccurring transactions. We're going to talk about classes and locations, and then obviously POs. So These are the big topics we're going to talk about today. You guys may or may not have quite a few questions. We ask you to just you put the questions in the Q&A and I will answer them. I allot a specific amount of time at the end of each section for questions. If I don't get to your question in that time, when we get to the very end of the class, I will make sure everything inside the Q&A is answered. So your question will get answered even if it's not right at that time of segment, okay? So let's go ahead and get QuickBooks open here. So again, I just prefer to use Google Chrome. You can use Safari, Microsoft Edge, that's your preference. We go to QuickBooks Online and then let's go ahead and sign in. And then obviously it's remembered my username, so. And I just briefly want to touch on this. As you guys can see, again, our dashboard is starting to actually have data inside of it that we have not had before. We have sales from creating invoices. You're starting to see shortcuts for things based on what we're using. You're starting to see expenses based on categories that we've done. So QuickBooks dashboard, as we're using it, is starting to generate information. And again, you can obviously customize your dashboard like we talked about before. So to change our subscription, you need to go up to your little gear icon here, and then you want to go to subscription and billing. So right now we're in the $65 a month, but we're paying $32 because it's on promo, and we need to upgrade our plan. So if we scroll down, we need to upgrade our plan for a couple things. Track projects, we don't have that as an option. Okay, here's budgets, not an option in the plan we're in now. And then we also needed, does it have POs? I know the POs are included in this. So we're going to go just to the $99 plan. So we're going to hit choose plan. And then it's going to tell you that it's going to charge you a prorated amount because of the time frame of the month, okay? To whatever credit card you had on file or bank account you had on file. So now we're upgraded. It says it's $99 a month. We no longer have that promo of $35. Because that's just kind of the way it works. And then obviously when we come back in here, we'll downgrade our plan from the same portal. So right now we've got the features we need, and that's how we're going to upgrade. That's how you upgrade. It's that simple. And again, you could go another level up and another level up. The only time that changing your plan is not simple is if you're going from normal QuickBooks Online to nonprofit QuickBooks Online, as you tell, that was not an option. So you would have to talk to, their salespeople and get somebody to help you with that transition. Okay. Any questions about that so far? Okay, awesome. So we're going to move right along. So we're going to go to project costing. And let's see here. I'm going to venture to bet I am going to have to turn this feature on, but I'm going to check. Actually, you know what? We have to log back out and log back in. We don't want payments. Go away. So sign out. And then let's sign back in. If I could type today. There we go. Nope. What is happening? Oh, helps if I log into the right account. Nope. No. There we go. So it automatically prompted me to in the upgrade screen because we just did this. We want to stay on that plan. So then down over here for project costing, we want to find. Oh, it's not showing there either. Hold on. All right, hold on. Let me pull up my PowerPoint here. So it normally has a projects tab on the black bar on the side. So let's see. Let me stop sharing for 1 second and figure out. Why it's not showing on my list. So it says that it should still be in the same. All right, let me share again. And then, sorry guys, I have too many tabs open. Okay. So let's look under here. It says is where it should be, and it should show projects. It should be listed right here, and it's so let's use our little handy dandy search bar here. All right. So up here, you can hit search in QuickBooks and find anything you'd be looking for. For some reason, where that tab is supposed to be, it's not populating. I'm going to see if as we get working in the project tab, I can get it to populate. But as you can see, it gives you a feature to jump to the project. You could do this for anything. And then on your home screen here, now it says add your first project, which we would need to do because we haven't created a project yet. So to add my first project, you want to click on here. And then the project name, I'm going to just do like training, just because obviously everything we've been doing is around training. If this pertains to a specific customer, you could select that. If it's a new customer, put the new customer in. The customer could be the event that you're running. So if you're running project for swim class, the customer could be swim class because you have to put it to somebody. It's a required field. Email address is irrelevant. Start date of the project or when you start funding for a project. And then the end date would be maybe the day of the event if you were doing something like that. You could scroll down and say that it's in progress, it's not started. You could tell it it's completed or canceled once you know. And then you could put notes so that you know what this project pertains to. So if you work with a customer on multiple projects, you could say in the construction world, this is the roof for 12345 Miller Road. And then the next project you do for them is siding for 5678 Bridgewood Road, and so on, right? So you can put detail in there, which is a big deal. And then you can add an address for this project if you click it. You know, your country, same as billing address, all those types of things, or you can ignore that for now. And then you hit save. So now it brings us into the module, what the module looks like. And each project is going to have income versus cost as long as it's assigned appropriately, right? It's going to show you a profit margin if there is one, if there are unpaid invoices, and then obviously overdue invoices for people that don't do it, okay? Then you can go down. So this is just your overview tab to view the whole project. Well, now you have to figure out, well, I need the nitty gritty. So you can get in here and do transactions, which require that you could do estimates, invoices, expenses, or bills. Okay. Any of the above that you're entering. If you've got employees working on it, obviously this is the ability to track time. This feature is used manually. It does not play into the time tracking system that QuickBooks offers, aka T-sheets. Okay. Then you'll have the ability to pull reports, profitability per project, cost of the employees, unbilled expenses. So you'll be able to see where you maybe messed up if you needed additional material you hadn't billed for and things like that. Project detail, this is all the information we filled out on the first screen. And then attachments, this can be where you add receipts, sales tax exempt stuff, estimates that were created, plans that were drawn out, the list goes on. You can keep everything inside of here if you would like, okay? Now, if you close this project, you do not lose this data. It's just a completed project. So I want you to keep that in mind as you're looking at everything here because it doesn't go away. It just is completed, okay? You obviously have the ability to click and edit the project notes. You can make it a favorite project or pin it so it shows at the top of your list. Unless you're doing hundreds and hundreds of projects, they're going to be pretty low, low key. And you can change, if you want hourly costs versus payroll costs, some of those types of things. And then obviously most of your stuff is printable or downloadable based on what you're doing inside of here. Okay. Now, what does this mean if you go and put a normal bill in? Okay. So I'm going to go into transactions here and I'm going to say we're going to enter a bill. So it will tell you now, we didn't have this line before, but now it has a line for customer or project. And as you can see, it tells you it's a project versus a customer. And then you can tell it if it's billable or not. Okay. Same thing's going to go inside of our expenses. As we're working with classes and things like that, we're going to get a new column. A lot of the things. Okay. Same with invoices, same with journal entries, but we haven't looked at those yet. You'll have this column to be able to tie things through. I'm going to close without saving because I don't want to create it. If you go into just doing an expense, like I told you guys, you see you have that column. Now, because I went from that project into the category, it automatically populated the project or customer for me. But if you're just entering an expense, you will have to fill this in. Do we have any questions about projects? And just a reminder, guys, questions go in Q&A if you have any. Okay, doesn't look like we have any questions, so we're going to keep moving. So let's talk about editing accounts. Okay, so we talk briefly about how to create certain accounts and what's the relevancy there. So there's a couple areas that we can edit accounts. Okay, so if we go into transactions and amongst our service bar or search bar here, you want to hit chart of accounts. We can edit all of these accounts. Any of these that we can edit. So let's find one that we created. And I think we did under utilities. Did we create telephone? So here's a telephone expense. Okay. So I can click here and click edit. And I can change this from telephone. Maybe I want it to be cell phone instead of just telephone. Okay. And I can hit save. So now I have to search cell phone to see that it was edited. I could make it inactive to make it disappear. But you can do this for any of your accounts. So if like you are a provider for cable is Spectrum and then you switch to AT&T, you could just call it cable generically, or you could call it Spectrum and then rename it to AT&T without eating up your accounts. Because as you can see, you only have so many accounts you're supposed to have. So being able to edit the accounts as things are developing and growing is going to be a big deal. Or if you use supplies, so there's job supplies and office supplies. You you could change the name to one of these to be shop supplies if you have a shop versus office supplies, which would be like ink and paper. Okay. So you have the ability to edit these so that you can minimize the number of accounts you're using to keep within your 250. Okay, so this is one area that you can edit accounts. The other area that we can edit accounts, which we called items or products and services, is if you go to sales, products and services, these are all items we created during training, and you can edit these as well. So you can edit where they go, if you need a description, prices are changing. So each season or each project, the price might change. You can update that. You can add images if you need to, if you end up using QR codes, all those types of things. But you definitely want to be able to edit that. Okay. The other thing we're going to edit a lot of is going to be under invoices. So obviously we marked all these paid for training purposes, but if we needed to edit one of them, this is just another wizard, so ignore it. We can do this, and then we can go to more actions and say we can make a copy of it so that then we can change it for the second project with this customer. Or if it's a reoccurring bill, then you can just charge the same dollar amount again, but you've now created a new invoice for it. If you need to edit specifically something on an invoice, obviously I recommend not editing one that's already paid, because if you're making edits to it, it might not be paid, but it could be that they added another service to it, so you could do taxes. So then now you'll see that I have a balance due. I have to save it. It's telling me I made edits, and I'm going to hit yes. And then now you'll see it's partially paid and show a balance due. So pretty much anything inside of QuickBooks we can edit. We can edit transactions, we can edit accounts, we can edit vendors, we can edit customers, we can, edit our products and services. You really just have to know what you're trying to accomplish when you're starting to do the edits, okay? So those are just some of the areas. I just want to make sure everybody knows that you can make changes to names, changes to prices, changes. We talked last class about changing customers and why it's important, or changing vendors and why it's important, and those types of things. But obviously, again, inside of QuickBooks, you can edit just about everything. Okay. Any questions about editing so far? So we were asked, do you have to manually enter expenses, or are you able to match them to a project? You are able to match them to a project. When you click on the expenses that are in the syncing scene, or sync in the download screen, basically, there is now a new box for you to see. So like if we go into transactions here, and let me go to bank transactions, and then scroll down. So if we want to click on this food option here, see now it says customer or project. We did not have this box before. So if you have your stuff integrated, again, whole point of QuickBooks Online is the integration feature we've been talking about, then yes, you can select it from there. So David asked if, as your example is that you change Spectrum to AT&T, does that change all the past history? David, the answer is yes, it changes the name on all the previous profit and loss statements, but no, it doesn't change the fact that you put the vendor or customer name in as Spectrum versus AT&T. So yes, it would change it on the reports, but it would not change it on having the proper vendor or customer listed. So Steve asked, is there a limit on the number of projects that can be added to a customer? My company has sometimes over 50 different projects for a single customer. Steve, from my understanding, no. Do not have a customer personally, by the way, that has used that many projects, but when we were in the project screen, just like when we were in the chart of account screen, it doesn't give us a warning to tell us there's a cap on that. So I would say the answer is no. An anonymous attendee says, can you delete a product or service that is not needed? The answer is yes. You technically archive it, not delete it. And again, that's part of making sure you're editing or cleaning up your accounts based on how your services are changing. Priscilla asked, will there be a recording that we can access later? Yes, Gwen will send that out like she does with the email and the PowerPoint. Okay, so it looks like we have one last question. An anonymous attendee asked, what does the reconciliation tab do? We covered that in the last class. So if you want to reach out to me directly after class, we can review that with you individually. Okay, so now let's talk about editing transactions. Okay, so we have briefly touched on this. There's a couple different ways to do this. So if you manually enter transactions, obviously you're inside of your bank register here, and you're adding a transaction from here, okay? So you see how I clicked on this gray bar and it's going to tell me to add a credit card expense and I can change all these options, right? Same thing applies to transactions you've already categorized. So say for example, at Subway, you didn't spend $11.29. We actually spent $111 and we missed a one, okay? I can click on this and then I want to click this little edit button. And then I need to then make the adjustment here. So I made the adjustment. Now it's $111. I bought sub for an event we were doing. And then now I can hit save and close. Now it says I'm going to change it. And I know that. And that's okay. That's the whole point of editing. So as you can see, QuickBooks is warning you as you're making edits that you're making these changes. So if you make a change, it can't be quote unquote by accident because it's warning you every time you're making a change. Okay. Or what if you realize that these two charges, although are different, quote unquote, let's pretend they were the same in duplicates. So I could click this and I'm going to click edit. And you can click more and then delete. And now it tells me my expense was deleted. Okay. Now, if I go back in and these are transactions that are coming in from the bank tab. So over here, okay, and I need to make an edit, I can click on my categorized tab. And all the items that I need to edit could be right here. So here's that Subway. So let's hit undo. And what that does is that takes it out of this categorized tab and puts it back in the for review tab so that I can edit it appropriately. And let's see. Well, I was looking for it, but I don't see it here. Hold on. I think I had it back this way. Yeah, so there it is, Subway. So now you'll see that it populates there. And again, if I can click on here and then categorize appropriately and then click add. And then it goes back into our categorize tab. But you can edit from here. You can obviously, you don't have to just undo. You can actually click on it, click on the expense here, and it will bring up the expense and you can edit inside of there. So you have a couple edit options when it comes to expenses. There's two ways to do it. If you're doing it off of something that you've manually entered and you delete that transaction, it's gone for good. If you are doing it from this screen and you undo a transaction or quote unquote delete a transaction, it puts it back into the for review tab. So it just depends on how you've got your QuickBooks Online set up on which feature is going to do what. Okay. And again, you can edit expenses, we can edit journal entries when we get there. We've talked about editing invoices, those types of things. So editing, again, lots and lots of options on how to edit things inside of QuickBooks. I tell customers and clients when they're first starting to use QuickBooks, don't be afraid to do it. We can fix it. If it's in the wrong spot, you can fix it. Put the data in, get it synced up, get it started, try to get comfortable with using it, and then make adjustments as needed based on what you're doing. And some people are kind of scared to do that because they think it's more work. Well, it might be, but it's a learning experience at the same time. So keep in mind that you can edit things and things are not always gone. It looks like we have a couple more questions, so let's take a peek. Erica asked if we can get a copy of the Q&A and the answers. Erica, I am answering everything live, so I think we can download the Q&A when it's done, but I don't know that it'll have the answers because I'm not typing the answers. So John asked, if you do not want to upgrade to have access to the projects, can you use tags to identify different projects for the same customer? John, the answer to that is yes and no. If you are familiar with how to pull up the tags report and can separate it appropriately, awesome. But it's not the easiest thing to do. And then obviously you're anticipating, as we have not talked about tags, that everybody remembers to tag. But could it be considered a shortcut? I would say probably. So Steve asked it, what if the transaction is already reconciled? Does QuickBooks let you change the transaction after reconciling? Think it causes an issue. So Steve, the answer is yes, it will let you change it. It will warn you that you're changing a reconciled transaction. The issue could be that if it reconciled and it was like the wrong dollar amount, then your reconciliation beginning balance would be off. But you obviously shouldn't have been able to reconcile if the dollar amount wasn't correct. If you're just changing where it's categorized, then it changes nothing with the reconciliation. So Laurel says, as long as the transaction isn't reconciled or linked to something else, is deleting from the register the best way? I have some old transactions that I don't want to see in the reconciliation process anymore. Yes, Laurel, if they have not tied through and they don't change your reports that you used on your tax returns, then you can delete them out. If they do, I recommend doing an entry to offset any of those expenses, selecting all of those expenses, and then putting a credit or a debit against it to zero it out. And then you could clean them up that way. And the only reason you would want to do that versus just deleting them is, again, if you have taken the expenses you're trying to delete in a previous tax year filing, you want to make sure you're not changing those numbers. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next one. So we're going to talk about subaccounts. So why do we want subaccounts? Subaccounts can be used for a couple different things. The main area we're going to use them is in our chart of accounts here. And some of the things you're going to want on a subaccount is going to be if you look at utilities. I like to see what I'm spending on gas, electric, internet, cell phone, and you can look at like if you have any other utilities like water bills, sewer, those types of things, they would all be listed underneath there. So I'm going to see a total number that every month or every year I spend $14,560 on utilities, right? But I need to know what I spent on each of those individual buckets. Now, the reason for me doing that is because, as you can tell, that not only have utilities gone up, but if you use a trash service, when you go out of contract, your trash bill quadruples. If you're on an internet service and you're locked into a contract, when your contract expires, your internet goes up. So it's an easy way to see if you have everything on auto pay when your bills have gone up or there's an increase and you need to figure out why. Okay. Or go back and check it. And those types of things. But it'll also help you see trends, like if you know you don't use gas at all during the summer, your gas bill is very minimal. But in the winter, when you're heating everything, your gas bill is pretty high. So you know you need to hoard cash to cover the gas bill in the winter. So it helps with some of those things. Other things you'll want subaccounts for, insurance. You have an insurance expense, but I probably want to know what my liability insurance is versus vehicle insurance versus health insurance or life insurance, all these different other options for insurance. So you probably want subaccounts for that. So I'm going to pull up insurance and then you'll see here's liability insurance. So I can hit edit and I want to make this a subaccount of insurance. So now see how it's indented? So on my financial reports, I'm going to see a major insurance bucket, and then I'm going to see all my sub accounts listed underneath it that have transactions categorized to them. Okay. If you're setting up an account for the first time, so I'm going to do this and do health insurance. Okay, and then I'm gonna say this is a expense account. And then we're gonna call it insurance, and then I wanna make it a sub-account of insurance. Okay, so now see you have two insurance accounts, sub-accounts. This is important for insurance purposes is because these get categorized on different places on the tax return, depending on what type of entity you are. Life insurance is not something you want to deduct when it's all said and done. So you want to make sure that that one is separate. But it gives you the ability to see how much you're spending. Again, health insurance is something that's going up. Car insurance is something that's going up. It just allows you to see what the cost of things is changing for your business and growing over time. Another area you might want sub-accounts is auto expense. So I think we have it as car and truck in here. Car and truck. So that's a very generic bucket. Well, if you're doing a lot of driving, you might want a fuel bucket, which would be a sub-account to here. You might want repair and maintenance would be a sub-account to here. Not that you put mileage in here right away, but you might want a mileage bucket for the end of the year. So you want to be able to track that. And then again, auto insurance might want to go under here because then you can see I own 3 vehicles and they cost me X amount of money amongst all the expenses that could be occurred, plates, license, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So auto would be another one you might want sub accounts for. The sub accounts are up to you. This is a total customization feature to you. At the end of the day, on a tax return, the CPA is going to take a car and truck expense and put it in auto expense. Okay. You're going to take your mileage report and put it on the mileage line. They're going to take advertising and stick it in advertising, but you might want to know what your domain cost is versus what you're spending in actual ads on Facebook or Google, and then what your software costs might be associated into that. Okay. Um, Again, utilities, the only thing they're going to pull out of there is cell phone. Cell phone needs to be separate. So these are custom things for you to see, not because it changes the way the tax filings are done. Okay. But this makes your report longer and longer. So this is a preference on you. Do you want the detail and have a multiple page report, or do you want it to just be these are in the right category account, we'll work with it and it gives me the detail I want? And that's only a decision you as a business owner can make. Okay. So let me see. We've got some questions. Steve said, if you're switching to QuickBooks Online from QuickBooks Desktop, will the accounts and sub-accounts transfer over? The answer is yes. They just might not be perfect, but they should transfer over. So Richard says, do all sub-accounts need to transfer back to the main account or need a total back to the main account? They don't need to, but they will. If you create them as a sub-account, it's going to create a main account and it will put the total on the line underneath it. It'll say advertising total and then it'll have everything there. Christy asked for me just to go over one more time how to create the sub accounts. So we'll do one for auto expense here. So I'm going to go ahead and click new. And then I'm going to say fuel because that's going to be an account I need. And it's an expense. Auto. Click this box that says make it a sub account. Even if you've already got an account created and you click edit, you need to click this box to make it a sub account. This box is the most important. And then select the account parent account, so the account you want it to be under. And then you'll see now. There's the fuel. It says, do sub accounts count against the limit of total accounts? Laurel, this is a great question. I don't believe so. And the reason I say that is because we have had 8 out of 250 accounts the entire time. So let me refresh my screen and see if that changes. So it does. So then, yes, they do count against your total number of accounts, up to the 250. Just doesn't automatically update once you create an account unless you hit refresh. So Richard asked, can I remove a sub account? The answer to that is yes. So if you go in here and we'll just say for the one we created for fuel, if you go here and click edit, you can take it out of a sub account by unchecking this box and hit save. And now it's not a sub account. Jean said the main account should not be posted to. Is that correct? Jean, if you're talking about like where it says insurance, there should be no number on the header, and then underneath it, all the sub accounts for insurance is where everything should be posted. That is correct. If it says insurance and there's a number next to it, but that's not the total number, when I emphasize that that's not the total number, then you've tied something to a generic bucket that you would then need to correct. Pat says, how do you combine accounts? Pat, are you talking about that you have two accounts with the same name? Or are you talking that you need to create and take an account that's already created and make it a sub account? And then Betsy said, do you have a list of accounts for sub accounts that are tax deductible versus not? Betsy, that is not a black and white question. It varies based on industries, type of entities, who's on services. Like if you're the owner and you're the only one on health insurance and none of your employees are, then it could go in a different spot. If you want to talk individually about your stuff specifically, I'm happy to go over that with you, but that is a very hard question to answer with just as many different industries we have on the call. So Pat says that her question is to combine accounts. If you have two accounts that you determine later would be better as one. So technically you have to move all those transactions manually unless you're in the accountant version, and then you can move the transactions as a bulk transaction. But they don't just merge together unless it's the same name on the account. QuickBooks will prompt you to merge it. So you would just have to click on each individual transaction and move it to whichever bucket you decided, or do a journal entry to move them, which we can talk about. Okay, so we're caught up on questions. So we're gonna move kind of right along then. So let's go into contractors and payroll. I talk very, 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 very briefly about payroll. It is its own animal and can be its own monster from a training perspective. So that would be something that Canton Score and I are working on potentially running a training seminar for later. But inside of QuickBooks Online, you have the ability to run payroll. It is a different, an additional cost. It is something that you do have to subscribe to, and they have different levels of subscriptions. Okay. But really inside of this module, we really focus on the contractor side because everybody has a lot of questions about contractors. How do I keep track of their costs? How do I issue the documents for them? How do I make sure I have the proper things at the end of the year to cover my own butt, basically? Okay. So there are a couple ways to do this. I encourage everybody to enter their contractors through QuickBooks Online. The reason for that is because you're supposed to have a tax form on your contractors called a W-9. The W-9 gives you their name, business name, type of entity they are, address, an EIN or social, and they sign off on it. It is all the information you need to give to your accountant at the end of the year to create your 1099s and so on and so on. Okay. If you add them through here, you get them. QuickBooks sends them an email. The email has the form they need to fill out. Once they fill it out, it loads it back into QuickBooks and houses the data for you. So it's a safe haven place to have it all versus paper. I'm a big paper person, so I keep both. It's personal preference, but sometimes when it comes to wrangling your contractors that you don't see on a regular basis because they're contractors, this is the easy way to get it done. Okay. I've had people ask, well, what happens if they don't have an email? How do I add a contractor? So we're going to add one with an email first. So I'm going to call myself a contractor here. And I'm going to put my email address in here. And here's our security code prompt to make sure we are meaning to do this. Let's see. So perfect. In here, then you obviously can keep the detail of how much you pay and then again, documents, okay? So now that we've created a contractor in here, I can click back to contractors and it shows a list, okay? Now you can click add a contractor. Nope, I don't want to go to your wizard. Let's see here. There is a way to add a contractor without an email because I did have somebody that asked. There are people that still don't use email. I think you have to, let's see here. Add my husband and see if we can do it. Tells me the field is required. Okay, so if you uncheck that box, that's how you do it now. So add a contractor, do not send an email, and then does it. So the difference is that a W-9 has been requested because they got an email to do it, and then there's a W-9 missing. Okay, so you would have to fill out this information for this contractor. Add personal detail, individual versus business, and then fill out the information that would be on the W-9, okay, if they don't have an email. So it's a little bit still manual on you, but you can do it. Now, QuickBooks offers the option to pay these guys with direct deposit. You can do that. Again, fee associated with it, time frame associated with it. A lot of times with contractors, you're either paying them on check through the bank, you might have an ACH portal, so on and so on. So that's totally up to you. If you do use their module, it will keep track of their last payment. And then obviously you have to finish setting everything up. Now, I get a lot of questions about like, oh gosh, I have contractors, but I already been writing them checks for months and months and months because we're 9 months into the year. Okay. If over here you have a transaction and we're going to go into the bank account, see if we can't find a check somewhere. See if we can find one. Well, let's do that. We'll do this one, paychecks. Okay. So if I click on paychecks and I want to say that my vendor and customer is Ann, and then we're going to contractor. It's not going to a project. It's not billable. So I'm going to hit add. And then I go back to my payroll here. It tied right here, that 3470 that I just categorized to it. Okay. So you can take the transactions that are clearing, however you're paying these people, Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, checks, ACHs, if you're running them through a payroll service, if you're using the QuickBooks module, however it's coming, when they clear here, as long as you're selecting the proper contractor and categorizing them as contractor expense, when you look at your contractors, it's going to populate that data here. So why is this relevant? This is relevant because then at the end of the year, boom, 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 QuickBooks Wizard's going to tell us how to create 1099s, see prep 1099s, and it's going to see all the payments that you've attached to this contractor, and it should total out to be the proper dollar amount for you. So it saves you work at the end of the year. Versus if you just put this in as contractor expense, you don't have contractors set up in here, then you have to go through and total those off of your P&L and hope that you've captured everything / categorized everything properly. So there's area for error in that process versus if you tie it all through. And QuickBooks is trying to streamline this process for you guys as contractors. Again, now if you want to pay a contractor, you could tell it which contractor you want to do. It's going to be a paper check. You can write it in and fill it out here too. And then it's going to tell you which account you need it categorized to or which account it's coming out of. So it would be our bank account, right? Or a credit card account for $100 or $1,000. And then if you need to apply it to a customer, and my check number can be 120. Okay, and I can hit preview. Oh, I have to choose the bank account, sorry. And this should then be contractor. And then now I can preview it. because it knows I'm writing a check. So then now they're working on this page apparently. You should be able to view it if you hit view all contractor payments. But yeah, so you can do it that way. And then if you're writing checks, then you can keep track of it and it goes into your register. So then when it clears on this end a few days later, it will have that matching transaction we've talked about to match the dollar amount and the check number and who it was paid to. So again, everything inside of QuickBooks is tying together. So it's really important that you do that. As far as employees go, you can't do much in this module unless you actually turn it on. This module has different things, like I told you, based on price and then what those service offers. If you're going to use QuickBooks for payroll, I recommend doing the Elite service so that they file and pay everything for you and you're not doing anything manually. But they charge you like a fee to pay the ACH plus the monthly fee and something else. And then if you don't do it by the proper time frame, then there's, obviously to get people paid expedited is a fee. All payroll services have an expedite fee. That's not just something QuickBooks does. And then obviously you can see like they're doing different things. So you would just have to see what your needs are and what you're willing to be able to file and create on your own. And then what they could do for you if this is a good fit. I will tell you at these prices per month, you are at the same price as it is to use a service. So you're not going to save any money one way or the other. And these obviously come out as a second subscription on your QuickBooks. And then you would see this information under your billing and subscriptions. You would have QuickBooks and then you would have payroll would be the second one. And right now we have a live assistance at $0 a month, but you would be able to see all your subscriptions still in the same bucket. Okay, would charge the same card, those types of things. Okay, any questions about contractors and obviously the briefly module on payroll that we don't spend a lot of time on? Joanne asked, I sell items on commission in a gallery. Would those commissions paid to an artist be considered a contractor? The answer is yes. But it could be called commission pay, but obviously you still have to issue a document for that artist to claim that money at the end of the year if it's over $600. So Erica says, what's the difference between setting up a vendor and a contractor? A contractor is set up inside of that module and is actually a vendor. If you set up just a vendor and you don't use the contractor module, you just have the ability to pull the vendor history, but they are essentially the same thing, Erica, because a vendor is somebody you pay and a contractor is somebody you pay. But not all your vendors will be issued 1099s. So that's the big difference. Like if you're setting them up as a contractor, they're going to be issued a tax document at the end of the year. Christy says if I have two sub accounts for the same thing, can I combine those? Yes, if you click on the one of the two accounts, as long as they're named the same, there should be a merge button that populates. If that doesn't populate, that means they're not named the same and QuickBooks doesn't recognize them to be a duplicate account and you would have to move the transactions manually. David says, I use vendors for contractors and I fill out the accounting box to point an independent contractor and I get the 1099 info at the year end. Am I doing that wrong? No, David, you're not doing that wrong. When you are in QuickBooks Desktop, that is the way to do it. And then obviously that information moves from desktop to online. And that's the way it's been done. Again, vendors and contractors are the same. The only difference with the contractor module is the ability to do direct pay and the ability to see a snapshot of what you've paid a contractor and the ability for them to fill out the W-9 and house it automatically for you versus as a vendor, you're manually entering that information. You're manually importing that document if you have it as an attachment. But at the end of the day, they are the same thing, basically. Laurel, it depends on what you might pay your contractors for. The number should be the same in both places. The vendor report, you just would have to filter based on date, time frame that you're trying to look at. Because you might not need to see their entire history. You might only need the last 12 months. Steven says, I am a sole owner LLC, so it is regarded as a disregard entity and the income passes through as my personal. Therefore, I should not need to add the payroll module. That is correct. If you are a sole owner LLC and you have not opted to be a small corp, you actually are not supposed to run payroll for yourself. So you would not need that module. The contractor module does not add cost to QuickBooks unless you use the direct pay. So if you're not going to use the direct pay, there's no cost associated with it. Erica, I'm going to have you reach out to Gwen about your question about the training sessions that you missed. Okay. So now let's talk about voiding versus deleting and why we do this. Okay. So we briefly talked about how if you were creating an invoice and somebody you did the work for either was going to short pay you or not pay you, what would we want to do? Okay. QuickBooks Online is very strategic in the way that it prompts you to delete versus void. I do very little deleting in QuickBooks. I would rather void it and keep the history. Okay. So for example, if you have an invoice and the customer is not going to pay you, when you delete the invoice, it's gone forever. Okay. You then, as an owner, are expected to remember that that person didn't pay you. Well, I don't know about you, but I do a lot of invoicing on a regular basis and I'm not going to remember that. So if I void it, I can write myself a note that says, never paid invoice, won't do future services, right? Or if it's voided, I either made an arrangement to write it off or something, right? And I take it out, but I keep the history of whatever the work was that I completed for that person. I just don't have a dollar amount associated with it. Okay. Same goes for transactions. If you're working inside of your transaction tab here, we have an exclude tab that is quote unquote deleting, but it keeps the data still here. So if I click here and I'm just going to grab a couple so you guys can see them, I'm excluding them. Okay. So they come out of my for review. They do not go into my categorize and they go to exclude. Now, the reason I would need to do this exclusion is if there's a duplicate, a typo, I did something that I wasn't supposed to, all those types of things. That's about the only time you would do it. But this is their definition of deleting and it's not gone. You can undo it and kick it back to the for review tab if you ended up needing it. Okay. So QuickBooks doesn't really want you to delete anything. Now, if you go into the register and it's a manual transaction you had entered and you click delete, it's gone. Gone, 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 gone. Like you will not find it in the for review tab because you manually entered it. So if your stuff is not integrated and you delete, it's gone. Gone, gone, gone. Okay. If you click edit, you have more options here. They give you a void button. Okay. So if you cut a check for a customer, they lose the check. So you have to cut another check. You need to void, not delete, you need to void the check number they lost in case, God forbid, somebody tries to wash it and cash it. You know that you've already voided that check number. You already had a check out with that number. Okay. It helps you identify things by voiding versus deleting. If you delete the check number out, it's gone and you are expected to pull through a paper that that check number was used and everything like that. So void, void, void. Same thing goes for invoices, like we talked about. So go into invoices here. I'm going to click edit here. More action, void. This invoice will go to 0. Yes, I'm aware. Okay. So now it's here. I still have the history. It just says void. If I open it, I still have whatever I said I did for him, and there's just no dollar amount associated with it. If you delete it, so if I hit edit, more actions, and I delete, I got no history. It's gone. So you want the history. 99% of the time, I encourage you to keep the history. So I would recommend always voiding versus deleting. Okay. Any questions about that? Looks like we have a couple questions here, so. Joanne asked if the direct pay is included in the payroll subscription. Yes and no. There is an additional fee based on number of employees that you direct pay that is not included in the flat monthly cost. That's both for desktop and online. Melissa, you will have to reach out to Gwen about your question. Brianne, you can take one of their QuickBooks certification classes to be certified in QuickBooks. They offer that if you just go to their the Intuit website, there's some options there. Yes. So it says when I transferred from online to desktop, or when I transferred to online from desktop, many items are in for review, and I don't know how to take care of them as they did not match to the bank account. Is it okay if I leave them all in excluded? Yes, put them in excluded in case for some reason you need them as you're going through your reconciliations. And then if you don't need them, then they just stay in that bucket and they're off your financials and out of your way. So JB asked, will you see the original amount invoiced if it is voided? No, you will not. It zeroes everything out. If you want to see the original amount, you would want to put a discount or refund or bad debt line item and put a negative number off to offset it to zero that invoice out. Is there a way to undelete a deleted invoice? Nope, it's gone forever. Okay, so next thing we're going to talk about is budgets. So here, oh, hey, look, our project tab came up finally. On our black bar here, project tab, and then here's budget. So we're going to work in the budget. Nonprofits might have a budget for a specific grant. You might use a budget on an annual basis. You might have a budget doing. That would be the things we want to use a budget for. Now, the downfalls of the budget module are that it's going to take all the accounts that you create on the P&L and balance sheet and show it in your budget module. And if you're only doing a budget based on a smaller account or a project, you will probably not need all those lines. So it is a lot of empty space. You can house budgets for year to year, and then obviously you can duplicate budgets. You can create a budget and have it break up over 12 months evenly, or you can manually adjust the numbers month by month to do whatever your trends might be. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a budget. So we want it to come off of the profit and loss, and we're going to say the fiscal year of January through December. It wants me to pre-fill. I'm going to do actuals. Okay. And then I can do customized widgets and all that fun stuff. We're going to hit next. It's going to prep my budget for me. Okay. So these are the actuals that I spent. And then I would have to fill in what I budget. Okay. So I could do that. My total billable expense is going to be 500,000. Okay. And it's going to break it up over each month. Or I could say in January, I do 15,000. In February, I do 25,000. In March, I'm gonna do 45,000. In April, I'm gonna do 55,000, and so on and so on. Okay, and then it doesn't have, it will total based on whatever you've filled out here. So you can pick it to do whichever you prefer. Now you can do it quarterly, you could do it yearly, you can do it monthly. Pull these reports, you can put it in Excel. You can reference previous years. You can change the name or the period. You can edit the name up here. Excuse me. But as you can see, all the accounts we've created are here, and not everything has numbers in it, obviously. You can find by an account number. I obviously have not turned on account numbers, but some of you do use those. Now, if I would have hit save, because I want to come back to work on it in a little bit. Let's skip the wizard for now. You'll see that the budget is here. And then you can hit view and edit, archive, duplicate if you're starting to build a new budget, delete, run a budget overview report. These would be things you might use for boards, or if you're meeting with, your team of executives to go over a project or trying to motivate people. You can use budgets in every industry. It's just not something that everybody takes the time to do. Okay. The goal of a budget is to see where you go over or under in expenses and why. It's a good way to spot check if you're doing forecasting and costing properly. If you spend more money in software than you're making for the people that are using it, then you're not charging enough, and you would be able to see that. You could see it in a P&L as well. Okay. You also have the ability to import a budget. So if you work in Excel, you can import that budget in here. But once you've built the budget the first time, obviously budgets stay pretty consistent. If you run the same programs year after year, you might have more programs, but obviously then once you've done the legwork to get it in once, you can then create budgets year after year. And again, you can pull all the history reports you want to see, and you'll see a whole list of all the budgets you've ever created. Okay. So the budget module is pretty basic, but something that can be used. And then obviously something that you guys will either use or not use. And then obviously the history is there. So it looks like we had a couple questions. Hector, the subscription I think I'm in is the Plus subscription. Let me just double check. What we upgraded to, I believe, was the Plus. And so the answer to that, I believe, is yeah. Wendy says my nonprofit client wants to run a budget according to their grants, which is not a set calendar or fiscal year. Can I change the date in the period box? Yes, you can, and you can set it up that way. And Wendy, sometimes you can run reports for grants based on how the grants are set up inside of QuickBooks. If you set them up as customers and then tie the expense to the customer, you would be able to pull a customer report. Yeah, so Hector, I'm in the Plus subscription and we do have budgets. Mark says, is there a way to only show accounts that have had activity in them within the budget report? I believe when you run the report, let's look. When we run the report and we're running run the actual budget here. And let's export to Excel. I want to see if it brings all the empty data down or if it only shows the stuff. So no, it's going to show everything no matter what. Now I do think, let me go back here. Let me go back to budgets. if I hit view and edit. I think you can. Oh, you can't even get rid of the ones you're not using. So I was trying, yeah. Nope, sadly, it's going to show everything whether you're using it or not. If you export it into Excel, obviously you can clean it up that way, but it does look like it's going to make you keep all the data. There's no way to hide even lines you're not using inside of the edit part of it. JB asked, how do you create a payroll budget? What are the factors that need to be included? Um, BJ, or JB, that's a very specific question. Why don't you reach out to me directly? Because there's a couple ins and outs with payroll that we obviously don't talk about on this training. Wendy, this would be some fiscal year, and she says it doesn't give her the option to change it. And so she wanted to know how to do. I'm gonna leave this question unanswered, Wendy, and see if we can't get to that before the end of the class today. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna skip over miscellaneous tools. We'll do that at the very end, and let's dive into journal entries. So journal entries, that can be a very controversial topic. So I will warn you now, I am one that does not like journal entries. I am a firm believer that journal entries should be something that only are done for depreciation purposes, big asset purchases, loan adjustments, and year-end adjustments that your CPA gives you. Um, the reason for that is that really, if you put in journal entries to offset everything or do all your bookkeeping, yes, it can be done, but they're not really auditable. And I've talked about that in the past, meaning that they don't give you the detail that it does if you just go through your transaction tab and see all the individual vendors that you actually spent the money with. So for example, Marathon, Chipotle, um, Wrestlers Meats, Bob Evans, like these are the people. Okay. Now, if you put all these in as a journal entry, you're going to say Marathon is gas and Chipotle is meals and entertainment and Wrestlers is owner's straw and Bob Evans is meals and entertainment. And you're just going to have a total meals and entertainment, $500. Wrestlers Meat for owner's straw is going to be $23. Gas is going to be X amount of dollars. So when you come to tie through with receipts for people that are looking at it, auditors, or anybody that's doing the auditing on the accounting side, they are going to have an issue of tying it all through. And the first thing they're going to ask for are bank statements and receipts and credit card statements and so on and so on. So that's why I don't encourage it. It also can create room for error. You can put it in the wrong bucket. You could be doing double work is another way I would put it. But we do need journal entries. There are things that we need journal entries for. So over here in your little plus new, you have journal entries. Now your journal entries, again, you'll select a date, whatever the time frame is, okay? You're going to have an account and you're going to have a debit or a credit. You put a description in, and then obviously if it ties to a customer or a project, you have the ability to have that there, okay? So let's do a fixed asset thing. So we need to do depreciation, which we do not have an account for. And I'm going to call this an other expense. Depreciation, save and close. Okay. So I want to credit depreciation. So I bought a new car. I want to depreciate it. I'm going to depreciate it in full on last calendar year. So I'm going to flip this back to December because this would be an entry I would do at the end of the year. And then this would go under accumulated. And we want to change this one to a fixed asset. We're going to do it called accumulated depletion. And let me make this a capital A. Okay. And then now you can see that it automatically filled in my debit of 41,000 because they have to be equal on both sides. Okay. And then I'm going to click save and close. Now, if I go to my reports, and I go to my profit and loss, and I need to change this for last year. There's my 41,000. And then if I go into my balance sheet, and I look at last year, well, actually, I probably can see it if I look at all dates. There's my 41,000. So you can see that I can use the balance sheet to, or use a journal entry to adjust the profit and loss in the balance sheet pending what I'm trying to do. Okay. Now, for those of you that don't know, that journal entry is quote unquote backwards. So you should never have a negative number on your profit and loss. So again, that's one of the things about journal entries is that it's very easy to flip them in your head because of what you're trying to think about. Obviously, they're easy to find a mistake for, but it's an area that can cause issues. Okay. So how would I go back to that? In this little dollar icon here, I can click on it. And then technically you would need to flip it. And the reason for that is that your depreciation should not have been a negative number on your P&L. And then the accumulated depletion should be a negative number because I should have an asset that I paid $41,000 for, and I'm negativing out that I've already depleted it, $41,000, and it should net to zero. Okay, so that's why it should be negative on the balance sheet, but it should not be negative on the P&L. And again, it has to go side by side and so on and so on. Okay, then you can hit save and close because you edited this, right? And then now if you pull your report, you can see that on the balance sheet, it's the negative number that it should be. And if I go back to my reports and I go back to my profit and loss, now you should see that it shouldn't be a negative number on the profit and loss down here. Okay. And again, number here, it will pull up that it said, you see here, there's no name, there's no memo, there's no account number, nothing tied to the journal entry in that detail. Where if I select cell phone, there's a name, there's a memo, there's an account, there's a bank account. See how the difference in the detail. Okay, so that's part of it. Can journal entries be used? Yes, absolutely. And there is a time and a place for those. Open balance equity, those types of adjustments are another one you probably want to use a journal entry for if you're just getting started. Those of you that are merging into QuickBooks Online but not bringing your desktop data or whatever data you've used in the past to do your accounting might require journal entries to get you to a starting point. If you end up putting personal money into a business because it needs cash, that would require a journal entry because you need to make sure that the shareholder account or owner's draw, members equity, those types of accounts are all tie out properly. But majority of the journal entries you're going to do are either going to be major purchases or what your accountant is telling you to do at the end of the year. Now, we do want journal entries at the end of the year because we need to make sure that what goes in QuickBooks is tying to get certain certain deductions on. So for example, meals and entertainment, you only get a 50% deduction. Well, you want to make sure that when you send a tax return to the bank, if they ask you for financials, that the financials match the bank. Otherwise, it creates questions. Well, why does your financial say this and your tax return says that, right? So it's really important that you kind of tie those through. And that would be a big reason to use a journal entry. If you're buying a big item and you're putting a loan on it, you not only have to put the asset on there, but you have to put the loan on there. And there's no transaction of that loan amount inside of your bank account, right? Because it's a loan. So until you start making payments on it, that's what you're going to see come out of the bank account. So you either have to set the loan up as an account that's sinking here, or you can create a journal entry to create the purchase of the asset and the loan. So again, journal entries just can be a way to create errors. Things can be backwards. It has to be balanced on both sides. It can be more work, but they can be used. It's just something that I'd say use with caution and do more of the detail with actually categorizing the real expenses. Do we have questions about journal entries? Does look like we have a couple questions. So Richard says, I use journal entries to bring deferred income into current income and to close out projects from the balance sheet on a gain and loss on the project. Is there a non-journal entry way to do that? Richard, that would be the proper way to use a journal entry. If you have deferred income, it went on the balance sheet until you complete the project, and then you would bring it forward. Same type of thing as doing accrual expenses. So that is actually the proper way to use journal entries and would be the only way I would recommend doing that. Christy says, would I use a journal entry for a cash payment or a purchase? The answer to this could be yes or could be no. If you see a withdraw out of your bank account for the cash, then you would do it off of that transaction on the bank account instead of a journal entry. If there is no way to track the cash that you are pulling or it's personal cash, then you would need to use a journal entry for that. Any other questions about journal entries? Okay, perfect. So right now we're about midway through. So I think we should take our break right now. So let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break. So it's 10:24 now, or we'll say 10:25. So come back at 10:39. So 10:40. And we will dive right back in and finish up our topics and continue to add questions. Feel free during the break to put all your questions in the Q&A section, and we will make sure to get those answered by starting with answering any of those questions when we come back in 15 minutes. Go ahead and drop any questions you have in the chat to start. That's where we're going to start the session with. I'm going to give everybody just an extra minute to get back. Go ahead and dive back in. Okay, so a couple questions in the chat that we have. Can you go back and see historical journal entries? Karen asked that. So the answer is yes. So let me reshare mine here. Let's pull up our QuickBooks. So there's a couple ways to see it. If you click plus sign, journal entry, and then this little arrow here, journalist, like you can click backwards to a journal history, or you can hit more. Plus sign, go into journal entries, hit your little clock looking symbol and click more, and you'll be able to see all your historical ones. It says, how does one categorize a deposit for a sale of some depreciated equipment or other fixed asset? So Joanna, that would go in a gain or loss of a fixed asset account that you would need to create. So it goes on other income or other expense, basically, that I would say gain or loss of sold equipment, and you would put that deposit there. Ruth says, can you edit a reoccurring journal entry? The answer is yes, and we will get into reoccurring transactions here shortly. So we will go into that in more detail, Ruth. Okay, so I'm gonna jump back up to our miscellaneous tools that we kind of skipped over to go into journal entries for timing purposes. So I'm gonna go backwards one step based on our chart of a table of contents that we wanted to cover. So there's a couple miscellaneous tools that I just like to bring to people's attention inside of QuickBooks Online. One of which is if you go to My Accountant, if you have an accountant already here, which we'll go ahead and add one so that we can open this module. So we did invite an accountant already. So let me go back in here and see if I can get it too. Let me hit resend invite, and then I'll actually have to accept this to get this module to open. So let's see when the email comes through. Give it a minute to populate. Here it is. And obviously this is just me accepting the invite so that hopefully we can open the module. So now let's see if I refresh this, if it populates this module now that we have an accountant in here. Yes. So this is a module that you can do to share data back and forth with whomever is either doing your bookkeeping on a regular basis. If you hire a firm such as mine to do entries every month for you and create reports to have calls, or if you want to send it to your CPA at the end of the year, but you can request certain things from them. And you can share documents with them. So it'd be a good way to drop like a secure area to hold all your bank statements, receipts, and those types of things. If you work in the nonprofit world, this module is even bigger. It's got like a closeout monthly reconciliation checklist and all sorts of stuff that shows in here. But you can also, this is how you would load information if you used like a QuickBooks bookkeeper, because they obviously offer that service as well. You have to get them the documents somehow, and they do that all through the accountant tab. Okay. And the only reason this didn't populate originally is because I had to activate that we had an accountant on the file. But if you already have an accountant that's actively working on it, this should have populated right away for you. Again, I just like to show it that you can request things back and forth, and it's a secure way to share documents other than email or dropping stuff off. And then obviously you can see what your accountant is doing and those types of things. Okay. So that's one miscellaneous tool. Another miscellaneous tool that I like to go over is our receipts and attachments. Okay, so there's a couple ways to do this. So we have a receipts button here that you can upload transactions, pictures of them here. You could also do it from inside of actual bookkeeping. So if I click on a transaction here, add an attachment, it pulls up your computer to add it. I'm going to add just a random one. And now you'll see that it shows the attachment here. And again, if you want to get rid of it, you just X out of it. If you want to recover the attachment, it brings it back. So it does remember some of those things. Okay. If a transaction is already categorized and you decide later, like for example, maybe an Amazon would be one that you want to add in, you can see what the receipts were. You could go into your register because it's already categorized. And then load an attachment. So the attachment feature is just kind of nice for things that we tell you to be on high alert for, like questionable expenses. If you go to Aldi's as a grocery store and you buy office supplies in the aisle of shame that everybody calls it, obviously that would be a receipt you might want to keep. If you went and bought repair and maintenance material, but that's not really your industry, it might be a receipt you want to keep. Amazon is a big one. We can buy anything and everything off of Amazon, so you might want to keep those receipts and make sure they're being categorized properly. It will play into like if you have a very large expense. So let me see if I can find a big one. I mean, 1500 is okay. So if we click on this and we click edit, and you want to do, oh, never mind, that's a transfer. We got to do a different one. Transfers won't let you do If we want to edit this, you can have additional line items. And then obviously you would put an attachment here for whatever it would be. So if I spent $3,000 on it or $12,000 on Amazon, I didn't buy one item, more than likely, though you could if you're buying a bigger item. And you might have it listed out on all the individual features, and then you would have a receipt that shows what those costs were associated with it, with each. And then you might have just a sales tax line and whatever else to tie out the expense or deposit to whatever it was. Okay. Same thing goes for the deposits. You could load the images of checks in there if you take a picture of them so that you can always make sure it's tying through properly. I personally just print them and then keep them attached to the bank statement, but you can house as much data inside of QuickBooks as you want. It's attachment wise. Now, some people say, well, will it bog QuickBooks down? Will it run slow? I've never seen that happen out of all the receipts I've seen loaded. So don't worry about that. It is a web-based platform. And I have not seen where they put any limitations on storage space per se that requires you to upgrade your subscription. Okay. So let me go to the questions. It looks like we maybe have a new question in here. JB asks if everything is backed up. Because it is a web-based platform, JB, you can export information down as a backup for you, but they are supporting this to where it is supposedly supposed to be secure and there shouldn't be a data loss issue. At least that's from my understanding. If you read the fine print in their contract, it talks a lot about that. When you obviously sign up, you have to read all the fine print. It talks more and more about that. But the only way you would physically be able to take a personal backup is going to be to export data. Benefit of QuickBooks Online versus desktop is it's housed in the cloud. Everything's supposed to be housed in the cloud is what a lot of people talk about, which is why there isn't really a backup feature like you have with desktop that's housed only on that specific computer. So if there's a fire and your computer catches on fire, you lose your desktop file. If there's a fire and your computer catches on fire, this is housed in the cloud and you can log in on a new device. So that's the difference. Okay. So since we kind of talked about attachments, let's talk about receipts. So receipts in QuickBooks tie to the mobile usage. So for those of you that are like, oh my gosh, QuickBooks is awesome because I can put it on my tablet and I can put it on my phone. It is, except it's got very limited features that you can do while we're things that we really, really like about it is that if you have employees that have credit cards that have the ability to have access to QuickBooks, aka you set them up as a user, like we talked about in the first class, and you grant them only specific access to see certain things, such as the ability to scan receipts, they can take a picture of their receipt as soon as they spend the money on the card. So, big one that tends to get lost, I see a lot in this industry, is gas receipts. People tend not to bring them back to me. And so, if they take a picture of it, then it puts it into a receipt tab for me. So, if I go into transactions, you'll see receipts. Okay. So, if there are receipts that your staff has scanned on their phone or you have scanned on your phone, they're going to sit in the for review. Okay. They will be listed right here. Let me get rid of this little wizard. Okay. Once you've reviewed them, they then populate in the reviewed tab. Okay. Reviewed means you have clicked them, you have categorized them, and you have tied them to a transaction that's loading in your bank transaction screen. Okay. If you decide that you need to add a receipt now, it will sit here as processing. May take up to 5 minutes to process. And then it will go down here to the for review where you then can click review. And then is a receipt. You can select a payee, what account it came out of. So if it was a credit card, click it out of the credit card. the date of the transaction. I'm going to date it today. If you have a reference number, I don't. You could write a memo. Lunch with fellow colleagues. And then you could categorize what expense it should go to. So I'm going to say contractor for simplicity purposes, and it automatically already picked up the amount. And I can hit save and next. And then it tells me that there is no transaction that matches that. So I'm going to say create the expense. This might be because the charge just happened and they need, sometimes QuickBooks takes an hour or two to process that charge is pending. So you would add it, and then when it comes through on this banking transaction tab, it will give us our little match feature that tells us that the transaction has already been entered. Okay, so again, the receipts tie in to it. You just have to tell it where to go. And then once it's reviewed again, it shows in your reviewed tab. It'll tell you who created it, so whoever loaded it, so on and so on. And then obviously you can see it's attached to whatever expense. You can undo add if you need to make edits. You can do from your Google Drive. You can attach emails inside of here. So it's kind of nice to have this feature. Again, another miscellaneous feature. 95% of the time it's used when you're out in the field and you're just taking pictures of receipts because you have people that don't come in all the time and they lose them or they get faded. That heated paper can be fade real quickly, especially this time of year in the summer if it's late in the sun. So just depends, okay? But again, ties into your bank transactions. Any questions about receipts? Question is, should we use gas receipts or mileage? I can't answer that question really. It really depends on how much mileage you have versus how much you have in gas receipts. Because technically commuting mileage is something that doesn't count. So that would be something that is more decided on individual basis with your accountant. Melissa says, I have been inserting expenses for food and hotel and expenses and then uploading my receipts. Should I use the transaction instead? I would use the transaction instead and then tie it. Yes. Just makes it easier for you with bank reconciliation and makes less room for duplicates. Okay. So we're going to keep moving. So now we're going to talk about sales tax. Not everybody on this call probably is eligible for sales tax. I am not the sales tax guru. I know enough to be dangerous in this area. So bear with me if you have a specific question on if you are supposed to charge sales tax or not. I may not be the person for that question. But inside of QuickBooks, we have a tax module, and underneath this tax module, it says sales tax. Now, we have not set up sales tax in this QuickBooks training file because we obviously haven't charged sales tax on anything. So we're going to follow through and kind of do this wizard to set it up. And then we're going to talk about the difference between what QuickBooks is doing and what you actually file with the state. Okay. So we want to use the automatic sales tax. So it has my proper address based on what I filled out. The tax agency is going to be monthly. It could be whatever frequency you're on. I'm on monthly. I do not register in other states. We pay the Ohio Department of Taxation. Okay. So now my module is live. And again, these are things that you have to fill out. And if you don't mind the wizard, if you scroll down, you'll see that it started doing sales tax only on this month. Now, if you have sales tax that you have set up in desktop version and you went to online, this should have automatically populated. You should see your history of all the filings. The only thing is that you would still have to tell it how to calculate the sales tax based on location. That's what QuickBooks does based on address, or if you want to manually select a city or county when you are doing it. Okay. You have both options. Now to go in here for my sales tax, I can click more detail and then it's going to show me detail. If I go down here, I can click review sales tax return. and it's going to show me. For those of us that pay it on time and or / early, you can add the adjustment in here to give it the discount. And the reason it can be credit discount. You can view the liability report. It's going to pull you back to here. Again, we don't have anything in this one specifically, but if I change it to all, there's nothing that we've charged sales tax on. That would be the things that populate in this report. And it's going to tell you what amount should be due and what the quote unquote due date is. Okay. So you have the ability to use this to do it. Now, it is really important that you use this module to mark these paid inside of QuickBooks to tie it through again to the transaction that's syncing from you actually paying it. When you mark it paid in QuickBooks, I cannot emphasize this enough. This is not actually paying your sales tax. You still have to log into the state site and actually file the sales tax. Here in Ohio, it's the Ohio Business Gateway. In other states, it's whatever your specific site is. You just then have to mark it inside of QuickBooks to show that you paid it so that your records match what you've paid on the actual site that you do the processing on. That way, then when it comes through in the transaction tab, you can tie it through. Okay. You can view the tax liability report in a couple ways. You can actually see this report if you just go into your report settings too, and you look for sales tax report. You don't have to just be in the sales tax module. Okay. You can edit your settings from inside of here, add rate, add different agencies if you have different places you have to pay the sales tax for. Or you work in different counties that have different, different things, or work in different states. Okay. Again, the rules for sales tax and who's required to file them, there's about a million pages of it. So I can't answer that in the time we have on the call today. But what you're doing inside of QuickBooks is just to make sure that when it comes through on our transaction tab over here through our stuff syncing from the bank account, that you have the ability to tie it through. Okay. Any questions about sales tax? Okay. Now that sales tax data does populate on a report for you. So if you look at your balance sheet, underneath liabilities, it will show you a sales tax. If you owe sales tax, it will populate here. So it shows as a debt that your company owes because sales tax is a pass-through here in Ohio, meaning we collect it from a customer and we pay it to the state for that customer. It's not money we're losing out of our pocket because we're charging it. We just are the middleman as a business owner. Okay. And so the whole reason you have to mark it paid is so that you don't have a big liability sitting here on the balance sheet. You can mark it paid and then it should zero or be within whatever the next month's worth of sales tax is to date. Okay. It doesn't look like we have any questions about sales tax. So let's talk about reoccurring transactions because these are things that people keep tentatively asking. Now, you can make a ton of different items inside of QuickBooks a reoccurring transaction. Okay. First item can be an actual charge that you have coming out of your bank account every month. It can be an invoice that you need to create every month for your customers if it's the same flat fee month over month. It can be that you have a car payment coming out, a rent payment. It could be a journal entry for depreciation. So there's a lot of different things we can create as reoccurring transactions. Okay. So if I click reoccurring transactions up here, I don't have any set up at the moment. So if I want to create a reoccurring transaction, you want to click new, and it's going to ask me these are all the different ways we can create reoccurring transactions. So somebody asked if you can do a reoccurring journal entry. You sure can. You click journal entry, click OK. It brings up your journal entry. You can name it. Depreciation would be my name on this one probably. Schedule is going to create 1 day in advance on a monthly interval on the first day of the month. And then start date October 1st. And end date none, but you could say bye and then end it So for depreciation, my depreciation would end 12/31. Okay. And then you put again in your count, debit or credit, a description. And then if you need to tie it to an account, you could put it here. So we'll just do this for training purposes. Oh, bye. Depletion. So I'm gonna do depreciation. Do 5,000. And then 5,000, I'm gonna hit save template. And then if I go back into my transactions, recurring transactions, there it is. You can do reminders. You can have it just automatically add them. You can also go in from a transaction tab and go to banking. And you can do, let me find, like Netflix would be a good one. Let's see here. Netflix. It sometimes gives you, let's see here, dues and subscriptions. Subscriptions, let's see, add. This is gonna be an expense. Let's hit split. So sometimes at the bottom, and it's not going to give it to me right here, but usually down here amongst these, it has an option to make reoccurring. So let me go ahead and just hit add on this right now. This is Netflix. And then let me go into the bank register. I'm going to try to get it to populate that reoccurring. Just hit edit. Make reoccurring. So from inside of here, inside of a transaction, you can make it recurring too. Things that you want to make reoccurring are things that never change. Car payments are the same for the entirety note of the car. Rent payments are the same for at least a year if you don't have a rent increase. Insurance would be okay for a year. But things you don't want to create reoccurring transactions for are like miscellaneous gas charges. Payroll might vary. Um, any other like generic utility bills, we wouldn't want to make those reoccurring because they're not the same dollar amount. And the whole point of this process is to keep it automatically entering it for the same dollar amount over and over again. So my dues and subscriptions, my Netflix cost has been the same for months. And I don't think it's going to change. I mean, it might change, but it's rare and they let me know when they're going to change it. So I could put this in as a reoccurring charge. Your software subscriptions are probably the same. QuickBooks, for example. So they do a payroll, they do an increase is the same. Now they've been doing increases. I think I got my 4th email of the year telling me that they're increasing the monthly subscription. So it's changed quite a bit. So I maybe wouldn't have set it up. But some of the other things I would set up as recurring transactions to make life a little bit easier for you. Okay. And then I can hit save template. And now if I go back into my transactions tab, make reoccurring, it's here. Okay, so you can enter them from this area. You can enter them like if I go into a bill, oops, sorry. If I go into a bill, down here in the middle, it says make reoccurring. So through our entire training, this has been an option. We just have not taken advantage of it to do anything reoccurring because it's something that it can be its own animal. And then, like I said, invoices, it's the same thing. If you go into sales and you go to invoices, create an invoice under customization, scheduling, sorry, make invoice reoccurring. And then you can name it. So you can name it by your customer and tell it what date you want to create it. And are you going to do emails? You know, all of those types of things. Okay. Looks like we have a couple questions about reoccurring stuff. So let's go ahead and dive into these questions. So Kim says, where do you find memorized transactions in QuickBooks? Kim, they don't really use memorized transactions. They only use the reoccurring. In their eyes, this can technically be the same thing, just obviously a different name. And you would use under the reoccurring if you wanted it to just be something that you needed to like be able to access at any time. Instead of making it auto-populate on its own, you would just be creating a template for it. I'm trying to see if there is. Yeah, they don't. That's the only option they have is the reoccurring, and then you would just use the template. So it says, what if there is a charge and it's been posted? So, or if there's a change and it's been posted. So you can go in and find the reoccurring transaction in your, so transaction, bank transaction, and then go into your register and see where that transaction was posted. And then you can either click on it and click edit and edit it, or you can void it. That's up to you. And then if there's a change that needs done on the actual reoccurring transaction, then you go into the reoccurring transaction and you click edit. And you could change it. Now, if you move from desktop to online and you have reoccurring transactions or memorized transactions, they will be in there under reoccurring. They will just be memorized as templates. Ruth says, I use reoccurring journal entries for payroll because it's the same accounts, but the amount changes. Can I edit the amount each month? Yes, you can. And sometimes that's a good way to keep it consistent if somebody helped you set that up. Yes, you can go in and edit the reoccurring every month with the dollar amount. So Jean says, if you enter a reoccurring credit to the bank and then the automatic download from the bank, will it be entered twice? It can be by accident if you don't match the transactions together. But if when the credit is put into the bank and the download happens and you click on the transaction to make sure it matches with what's already put in there, then it would not be entered twice. And we talked about matching in the last class. Any other questions about reoccurring transactions or memorized transactions? Okay, so let's talk about classes and locations. So we have classes, locations, and POs. And as you can tell that we had to upgrade our subscription to have access to some of these things. And so it's gonna depend on what we're trying to do on whether we use them or not. Okay, so POs are used under the sales tab. This would be for you to keep a job number to be able to tie out maybe your invoices and everything like that. So under create an invoice, there is a section here that we have to schedule, we have to turn on the POs. Let's see here. Need to manage the custom fields. So I have to add a purchase order. I want it to print on the form, and the custom field is going to be PO for me. And then sadly, you have to go into settings. You have to turn it on. So let's see. Shipping preferences, yada, yada, yada. Let's find. Nope. Nope. Customers, purchase orders. So it actually turned it on already. So purchase orders are on. And then the other thing we need to find is our classes. So track classes, that's off. So we want to turn this on. And track locations, we want to turn on. And then we're done in our settings to be able to do the things we need to do. So now if we go to sales and we create an invoice, you'll see tags are here, the location is here, and then we should have our PO here. Let's make sure that it's coming. Now let's go back into sales. And once you set them up, obviously once, you don't have to keep setting them up, but as you can see, it takes a minute to get it to populate. There's your PO. But other than that, now you've just added something else on the field for you to fill out, obviously, if you're using it. Okay. So you'll see PO populated, our location populated, we're turning it on, and our class populated. Okay. So let's take a minute and kind of talk about these. So POs are the ways that people tie out stuff through jobs. For us, an example, one of my clients is a window company, and he needed POs because he works for a lot of rental companies that own a lot of different units. So he puts on the PO what unit the windows are being replaced in. So not only the client knows, but the person going to do the job knows where to go versus just going to the main headquarter office, which might not be on the same site. You might want to use it because that's how you're going to tie all your expenses through for this job. If you're a construction worker, the PO could be a number and it could be a name. That's a preference on you guys. Okay. Locations. This could be that you have multiple locations and you need to tie whether it was an in-state transaction, out-of-state transaction, a North Canton transaction, a Navarre transaction, whatever those options are. Okay, so you could use a location. Location says hidden because it's not going to print on the invoice. This is an internal use only. Okay, same with classes. Your class is hidden because this is an internal use only. Okay, classes are going to be used for multiple reasons. It can be used to track projects. If you're in real estate using QuickBooks, it can be used to track each individual property. It can be used to track locations technically. So if you have one main company that has 2 locations, you would put a class for each location so that we know where the revenue is coming and the expenses are coming, to make sure that we pay that, if you're in a city, pay that city the proper dollar amount. And you don't want to overpay them. How does this data pertain to what we've been doing? So if you go back into your transactions tab, now that we've turned on classes, and we go into banking and you click on one of them to open them, now we have another line item, another 2 line items. So you would have to add this information. So I'm going to say test as one of the classes. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to hit add, and then I'm going to do just another random one just to try training as a class. And then if I go into my reports, oops, Now, if you need to see the data based on location, classes, or even POs, down here, it gives you the option to go by classes. And if you hit run report, now you'll see that there's one class that I created and another class I created, and then a bunch of stuff that's not classed at all. Okay. So if you're using classes, the goal is that you do not have this not specified column. Obviously, everything needs to be put in one of the classes. If it's not, then it creates questions. This is an internal thing. But if you have rentals, it's very easy for you to say, like, this unit gave me this much in rental income, and I put in this much in expenses for repairs and maintenance. This is its insurance. This is its property tax. This is the legal fees. Do you see what I'm saying? Because as that industry, you have to have everything priced per building. But this could become a report that becomes massive. If you're a nonprofit and you use classes as grants, then this report could be really large. If you use classes for projects, it could become really large. And so you could have a report that's really, really, really detailed, long ways, and then at the end of the year, all you need to see is this, is the CPA is doing the 990. Okay. So it just depends on industry, on what you're going to do with the classes. A lot of times I see it used because they have multiple companies under one roof, but the funds are all mixed, or they have multiple locations, and we use the classes to justify the locations. Okay. Now, to get to where your classes are, you click on this and you go to lists, or it doesn't have my list options, I guess. Oh, right here, all lists. There we go. And here's where you can see your classes. Same thing goes for locations. If you want to use locations, again, it's kind of the same thing as classes. They kind of play in. So I tend to only turn one on and not the other. You're limited by locations. You can have 40 with your plan that we have at $90 a month. Can have 40 classes. So sometimes if you need both, it's because you run over that number. And then people have been talking about tags. I don't normally teach much about tags. You can tag things based on employees and things like that so that you know internally what the stuff was used for. And then obviously you can pull a report and see whatever you've tagged will show here. So if I go into into my transaction tab and I open a transaction, see how it says tag. So I could tag this as Ann. Like sometimes I tag for sales reps or commission paid people. And then I can add. And then again, if I go back up here to my list, now that tag is here and I can see that it has one transaction. I can view report. So when somebody asked me earlier if you could use tagging as a way to see the contractor expense, the answer is yes. It's just another module, and it's not something that shows anywhere but here that it's by that person that was tagged. If you look at the P&L, it's going to just show everything in contractor expense or wherever you categorize them. You would have to look here. And the downfall of running this report is that then you have to figure out what time frame you're trying to run and doing a couple other things, but it has the ability to do it. Okay, it's not the cleanest way to do it, but it can be done. And again, you can see the transaction that was tagged. So tags work to sort stuff. Classes work for multiple locations, and locations work for multiple locations. Okay. And then POs are to tie things through with if you need to know where a job is, if you want to tie it through with invoices that are coming through. So for example, my invoice number might be 12345. When I call my supplier, Bernard Daniels, Carter Lumber, Home Depot, I say, hey, it's for job number 12345. They put that on their PO and then it ties through so that I know that everything matched. Okay. You can use POs in the billing department if you enter bills and then pay them later. Obviously, another way for it to tie through. But again, the POs, classes, and locations are only offered in this subscription, the $90 subscription, not in any of the lower subscriptions. So that's why the workaround tags are in all of the subscriptions. That's why some people ask about them, because you can make it work for what you're trying to do. Okay. So then the last thing I want to talk about before we do any other questions, and I can see if we have some questions about the tagging and POs first, is we're going to then downgrade our subscription back down to our basic subscription. So we have a couple questions here. Is it I'm assuming, is it best to auto post or manually post is what that's supposed to say. That's a preference on you. I'm all about the manual post because I like to see it and make sure it's right and that something didn't change and it puts my hands on it as an owner. But there are things that you can automatically post that you would be comfortable with and that you'll still see if you look at your financials on a monthly basis. So that is an internal thing. Erica says, so can the POs go through different levels of approval? Inside of QuickBooks, no, there is no way to quote unquote approve anything through here. That would be a manual thing. Obviously, the goal would be that you have a purchaser that's ordering the proper stuff, and then you're making sure that the bill ties out to what they ordered, but that's not really done like it is in enterprise level QuickBooks in QuickBooks Online, sadly. Hector says, when should we use classes versus projects versus customers? Classes is going to be based on locations. Customers are people that we are selling to as an end user. So obviously you will always have customers. And then projects is just an option inside of QuickBooks to track a specific item. Projects and classes would kind of do the same thing. Projects is just showing you as the project is going on. The class is going to show you only when you pull a P&L. So again, Hector, that would be kind of a personal preference on what you're trying to do and what reports you want to run. David says, I use tags, but not classes. Is there a way to have QuickBooks warn you when you do not select a tag? David, I don't believe so, but let's take a peek and see if we look under account settings, if there is something we can maybe set up. We're looking for it to say, so it says tags are on. Let's see if we show tags is on. I don't see anything that gives me an option to try to get it to warn you about the tags. I'm gonna assume because obviously tags are offered in all of them and so they're always there. Where if you turn on classes and whatnot, you're specifically trying to get it to populate something for you. So that would be why it warns and the tags don't. So Gloria says, if you have a minute, can we talk about filtering, creating reports with filters? So Gloria, I can. So if we go into our reports tab and you go into a profit and loss, this is all the options you have. And then you even have a customization tab you can do. So you have the ability to go through different time frames. You could obviously manually type in here. You can show columns by different things that you're trying to do. David, I see here there is an ungrouped tagged report, so you could see what you missed tagging wise. And then you have active rows, and then you can show a comparison, so previous year income, any of those types of things. If you click on the customize, again, you get some of the same things, but here's your filter button. So if you want to filter by certain things, classes, locations, employees. Okay. Same thing for here is once you get this categorized, if you click into something, these all shift to filter and move around what you're trying to look at. Cash reports versus accrual. Again, you can look and see what other filters are set up. But yeah, that's about the extent of the filtering inside of QuickBooks. And obviously you can change anything you want to do once you click inside of it. Once you're to this page, just the overview of reports, P&L here, there isn't much to filter per se, other than that you can obviously like take the detail away if you want. And make your report teeny tiny. I'm just reading a question that we have next here, guys. So it says one segment of my business is residential rentals. So I would have residents versus tenants versus customers. I was once shown, but forget how I would rename or label this. I believe each rental is done within the categories. I'm forgetting the exact name. The other segment of my business is for creative services. So client customer would be the correct verbiage. I'm not sure I understand the question here. You're correct. It sounds like you have two totally different businesses that you're trying to merge into one QuickBooks file, which is fine. So you could use classes to show each of your rentals, and then the tenants would be the customer of that, obviously, would be the person renting from you. And then you would have customers on the creative side, which then you could just have a class for creative services that you would calculate all your income there versus expenses to show each of it differently. Let me know if that answered your question. David said when I use enter transactions with receipts, there is no way to choose a tag. If I were to use classes, would that field be present? Let's check it. I think so. We go to receipts. Let's upload a receipt. We'll just select something. And it's processing it for us. So down here, if I click review, it gives me an option for location, and it does give me an option for class. So yes, it does not give you tags here, but it does give you classes here. Jean says, do you cover what you have to do to set it up so that the totals go to the proper places on a tax return? Jean, in the first session, we talk about the proper categorization categories based on IRS, guidelines. As far as the tax return goes, that's kind of depends on what type of return you are, and then what type of deductions you're taking for certain things. So we don't really talk about that. That's more individualized, something you would want to talk to with your accountant or whomever's doing the taxes at the end of the year. But it is something that we do cover, at least the categories, to make sure you're categorizing your transactions properly. And then you can choose to build your reports to match a tax return, or you can choose to build them to do something to grow your business, or if you're mentoring with anybody, if there's something they're trying to factor, there's might be a specific way they want to see things. Wendy, I did some digging on our break about the period box on the budget, and I have not seen anywhere where we can change it. So I will do some more digging. If you want to email me directly so that I can see if I can't put like a question ticket in with Intuit to see if I can't get you a better answer about that. Sadly, it sounds like your best option might be to have to port it out and then adjust the dates into an Excel sheet and then make any adjustments that way. But it's a lot of work to do that. At that point, you might as well just pull a P&L and probably build it yourself. Sadly, QuickBooks Online is not the most customization software out there. That's one of the things people tend to complain about is that they've built this infrastructure and everybody has to kind of come to it or it doesn't work. Any other questions for anybody out there? Make sure you put your questions in the Q&A section, guys. Okay, so while it sounds like we maybe have rounded up all the questions and we are actually done with the topics we want to cover today. So, next week's class is designed for nonprofits. We will actually be working in the nonprofit QuickBooks Online, which does look different. There are a couple different modules that need to be done in that. There is different things you can see as an accountant versus if you are the owner or the executive director of a nonprofit. For checks and balances, we will talk about grant tracking and go over a lot more verbiage specifically for nonprofits. Obviously, they have some additional custom reports they want to do. They do work with the budgeting tool and those types of things. But the next class on Thursday is 9 to noon, and it is designed for nonprofits specifically. Obviously, anybody is welcome to join, but if you don't work in the nonprofit module, it will look different to you. So I just encourage, want to make sure that that's known. And then it looks like while I was talking, we got a couple other questions. So let's answer these questions because we have the time. Michelle just wants everybody to know that QuickBooks makes an advanced version. So we're in the plus version. There is one more version up from us that gives you some more of the customization features, especially for reports. The advanced subscription is obviously a little bit more money. So it says, is there a receipt to print when a customer pays? You can print a sales receipt or you can print a paid copy of an invoice that shows a zero balance. That would be about your two options. Hector wants to know if he did not attend previous classes, if he can get recordings. Hector, I'm going to have you reach out to Gwen for that. Erica, Gwen will send out the registration for the nonprofit class with the PowerPoint and the recording from today. But obviously, it should have been the same way you registered for today's class. You just would need to do the next class as well. So Jennifer asked, if an estimate is created and then accepted, how do I attach it to a project? This is a great question. Obviously, we talked more about estimates and stuff last week, but I don't have any problem taking a second and answering it. So if you go under sales and you go to estimate, and we haven't created an estimate, you would create an estimate that is approved. So we're going to just pick a customer really quick just for training purposes. Save and close this estimate. So mark accepted. Obviously, Anne accepted it. But obviously, if you were doing real estimates, you would send these out to customers that accepted it. You would convert it to an invoice from the estimate screen. And then we need to turn on, let's see here, under customization. You want to add a field and you want to do this for We're gonna do this for name it project. And if we go back into our sales and we want to convert this to an invoice, we should see there's your project line. That's the only way to tie it through to a project, and I'm not sure that just because you put it here that it's actually going to go into the project costing module unless you invoice through projects. So if you click in here, if we do it says invoice. Because it named the customer, whatever the project was, is how that tied through that way. So you have two options. You could just type in on the project so you know, or you need to select the customer that you did the project for and do it through the project tab in order to get it to tie through that way. But obviously that estimate, you'd have to try to convert to an invoice. And so I don't think you're going to be able to tie it through. The next question is, what is good grant tracking in regular QBO? We will still talk about grant tracking on the next call. So that would be something we talk about in the nonprofit training. So feel free to join that class to get that information. He says you mentioned something about QR codes. Is that something doable in QuickBooks? Yeah, like if you have U codes for like an item that you're selling, you can put that in there. As far as like actually scanning them for items to be paid, unless you're using the POS system, it wouldn't do anything for you. It says, does QuickBooks Online have certified payroll reports for contractors? I actually don't know, as I don't use the QuickBooks Online payroll. Hey Gwen, can you message Erica directly to give her your contact information?
I put it in the chat and I'll redo that.
Okay, no problem. So it says with sales tax, once you set it up, you can't go back. You can go back. You just can't always edit what you set up, but you can set up a corrected item. So as long as you're selecting the proper thing, you'll be okay. But yes, you can manually enter sales tax at the bottom of the invoice. You can what's considered an override. Wanda, grant tracking is not only available in nonprofits. It's just only taught in the nonprofit class because that would be the majority people that would have the grants. Erica says, can you share Owen's email? I think she means Gwen, so we took care of that already. Karen said that she was on prior webinars and had not seen PDFs of the slides yet. Joanne asked, do I teach classes using the QuickBooks POS system? I do not. It's not something that I actually use personally or have anybody in my Rolodex of clients that uses it. Karen, I know that the webinar slides were posted in the chat, so if you scroll up, you should be able to find them. But again, she will send those out with the recording as well. And then Joanne asked, can you show sales tax liability and then manually entering a sales tax payment? So If we go under taxes and go to sales tax. You want to view sales tax. So I can't pay it because it doesn't show me anything prior to the report that's not due yet. So I can't. But when you click view sales tax report, it opens this module. And from here, it's should say make payment. And you would click that, and then it's going to bring up a box that shows you like the adjustment, the taxes, and you're going to select the date the payment was made, the account it came out of, and then the dollar amount that you paid, and then hit confirm payment, and it will go auto populate. And I believe if we pull up on the PowerPoint, I can show you. So record a tax payment is the option, and then it brings up a box that doesn't look quite like this anymore. It's more long-wise, but it's the same concept where you're going to tell it the bank account, the date you paid, it's going to the tax period, the dollar amount, and then you hit record payment. And then now you'll see that it shows the total paid and the date paid. And the county if you have counties. If you want, Joanne, I can go over that with you and individualized because obviously because we set it up today, it doesn't prompt me for anything but September and won't let me pay September's because it wouldn't be due till October's. But we can go through one personally with you if you'd like. Okay, last thing I'm gonna do is just give you guys my contact information again. You guys have had it for the last couple classes. I'm just gonna drop it in the chat. My email is asharp@excellentadmin.com. And my phone number is 760-7478. Okay. And feel free to reach out to me for any additional support you have. And then the next week's class is the nonprofit class. I see that they just posted the PowerPoints again. And then obviously gave you a website to go in and look for the local score. And if you guys need any other help, like I said, feel free to reach out to the score guys or myself personally, and we can go over anything. Otherwise, I hope to see most of you guys next week as we dive into the nonprofit portal. Erica, yes, I did post my contact information. Let's see here. I think I didn't post it to everybody, so let me post it to everybody. And it looks like we did get one more question since we still have a few minutes. It says, you covered this last time, but when entering checks written manually, could you show me how to do it again? So there's two ways to do it. If you go into transactions and then you want to go into your register. So you're in your bank account, go to bank register. On this top gray bar here, you want to click it. You want to change this to check. You're going to change the date to whatever date you wrote the check number, fill out the payee, payment amount, and then categorize it properly. And then you'll hit save. And then if you are integrated where your bank account is syncing, when those checks actually clear the bank account, it will prompt you to match those transactions. Okay, I don't see any more questions or anything else going on, so I think we can end the class just a few minutes early, guys. Like I said, feel free to reach out if you have anything individualized over to the Can't Score guys or to myself, and I will talk to you guys next week. For all of you that'll be on the last training session that we have of this series, which is going to be the nonprofit one.
Okay. Thank you, Anne, and we hope we see most of you next week for the nonprofit training. And thanks for attending today. And that will say goodbye. And thank you, Anne.